Good morning, everyone. I'm Glenn, and this is Zach, and welcome to episode 2 of our podcast, God at Arm's Length. This is a journey to break down the barriers of broken people, those that are reaching for God while keeping Him at arm's length. As always, we strive to be scripturally sound and humanly honest. So last week, we kind of just talked about why we were doing this, went over a few things that kind of just about ourselves and the whole idea that we're broken people, that life has not always dealt us the best hand. Um, but even if you did get dealt a great hand, that's still a great story. But today we are going to talk about fear. And that's a big one, right? Everybody's afraid of something. But today we're going to talk about fear of three things: disappointment, success, and intimacy. Um, what do you think about fear, Zach? When you hear the word fear, what does it bring up in you?
Yeah, no, man, I'm excited to hop into today's episode as well, man. When I think of fear, I immediately think of everything last week we talked about just with the barriers, and that like natural, like wanting to push something away or keep it something only a little bit close. I think about that immediately. I feel this like restriction, like of wanting to either run or kind of like like just want to retreat, run and retreat. That's kind of what I think about when I think of fear, or just different things that I've seen from people and things that have happened to me that have caused me to want to hide.
Yeah, I get that. It's easy. Like, we'll just jump right into disappointment. When you grow up in a certain way, where the people, I believe personally, for the people that, you know, were there to build you up to start with, when your foundation, all those people disappoint you. That's all you expect from everybody. I know in every relationship I go into it like, all right, well, this person's gonna walk away from me, or they're not really truly my friend. They don't really have my best interests at heart. They're just here to use me or whatever. Um, and I look back on my life and I realize that those things are just manifestations of different people that I've come across in my life that were, I would consider, foundational people.
Mm.
My parents were foundational people. My father was a foundational person in my life, and he never set a great example of what that should look like. It was, everything I did was never good enough. Um, the constant not being there, from being an alcoholic. Beer was more important than anything.
Mm.
Um, and by the end of the day, when he had already consumed a case or a case and a half of beer, um, there wasn't a person there anymore. It
Mm.
was just somebody slumped over on a couch and, couldn't think of a coherent word. And I was only 9. So, it just was one of those things that I've been disappointed a lot. Um, and then to have, to find the church at 17, 16, 17, and think I found a home, and to be disappointed by those people, like, I felt used. As a football player in a small town, you get a lot of, everybody knows who you are. There's only 3,000 people in the town. You're a star or one of the stars on the team.
Wow.
Everybody knows who you are.
Right.
And, um, I wasn't the only one. There was a couple of my friends that were in youth group that were on the football team, but we felt like we were used, on a football team to help grow the youth group. And once we turned 18, that we were just discarded. Like, don't come around anymore. We got everything we wanted out of you. So there's those disappointments of all these foundational people, um, in my life, personally at least. That's what I expect from everybody. I go into every relationship like, all right, you're either here to use me, or you're gonna just, you know, uh, you don't have anything. My, you're not here for me. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like we talked. I touched really briefly on all the like theology of the garden, why we run and hide and put people at like a distance, and that whole thing, especially with our relationship with the Lord. But I naturally think, uh, I think of that happening in every situation, too. Like when I show up to basketball, or like back in high school, or in college when I join a leadership team, or I don't know, about to lead X, Y, Z, fill in the blank, and especially in the church, and I'd immediately feel like that, like it's just like I'm a product or something that I can get the most out of, and then yeah, it's like you said, as soon as it's gone, as soon as what I've done is done, then there's no value anymore, and whether it's me or watching it from third person with other people. What I meant to say is like, what I'm trying to say is, it's like this taker mentality. We said givers and takers. Talked about that in the garden last episode, and it's like it feels like you're everyone around you when you're dealing with this kind of insecurity and this fear. It just feels like everyone is a taker, and like they're just out to take what they can get from you, and you feel like naturally that you're the same, like you don't think of it in the moment, you're like, man, I'm just trying to give, but then after you look back, you overthink, and you're like, man, I feel like I'm also just robbed, trying to survive out here, and take just to make sure I'm alive and I feel good, and yeah, it's crazy. And so
Yeah, no, I get that. It's I look back and there's definitely times when I'm like, you know what, these people are just they're going to disappoint me, so I'm going to set them up to disappoint me by being a taker. You
mm,
know, all right, I'm going to get the best I can out of this situation so that they have to walk. They have to walk away, and then it's this weird like cyclic thing where it's like, all right, well, I'm going to make sure you disappoint me, and then I'm going to blame you for disappointing me when I was really truly the problem in the first place. And I think that's something that's
mm,
it's a barrier that I think a lot of people put up um, without really, being cognizant of it, recognizing that that's what they're doing until after the situation's over. And you have to have a true, honest conversation with yourself about it. Many people can go on, and I still have that same problem. I work really hard at like trying to trust people.
mm,
Um, but, even in my marriage, there was things that I trusted my partner with that I shouldn't have. And, that's a really hard thing to accept, right? Um,
mm,
Especially when you want to go into another relationship, or you go into the next relationship with whoever that is. God tells us we need to trust that person. Like, especially if they're a Christian, we need to be able to be uh, vulnerable, and it's a word that men in particular, but broken people really struggle with. So, it's everything's about waiting for that shoe to drop, that fear that there's going, no matter what happens, I'm going to be disappointed,
mm.
right? Somebody's going to let me down. Somebody's going to disappoint me. And, I think a lot of times we miss the point that we're the ones doing it.
Hmm. Yeah, a couple thoughts come to mind. Yeah, I just think of, yeah, just like on that point of vulnerability. As we talked about last episode, we just overviewed like, hey, this is kind of what the struggle is. The problem is trusting God. It's other people, and what is restricting and causing this uh, lack of vulnerability and honesty, really, is, yeah, it's that fear. Um, and yeah, I'm thinking of a couple different moments. Let's say in college, or yeah, especially college, because man, that comparison trap, and that's kind of another whole subject. But and you're going into every situation looking at like, man, what are these people bringing to the table? How am I the same? How am I different? Um, but because of the insecurity, you kind of just, man, you don't really know what you really bring to the table, honestly. And then, like we were saying, you just expect others to kind of take. And so, whatever you just brought to the table in a moment of ministry or anything like that, just doing it. I just did a church residency for the last year as well after college, and great time, but definitely had insecurity in myself too, and saw it in other people too. And so, yeah, if you don't know yourself and you aren't willing to be open about yourself, and fear can blind you, and it can make you run before you even before you even arrive to a place of people or the activity that you are set out to lead or be a part of. I mean, you're running like that's you're never, think of it this way, you're never standing still, you're always running, like you're always running from something, you're expecting to have to run before anything even starts, before the race even starts, you're running. So
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to like we talked a little bit about, when you're around a group of people and two people are off talking by themselves, that instant, like they're talking about me.
yeah.
There's, um, there's times, sorry, I had a thought and now it's gone, but
Yeah, you're good.
there's just times when you're out there, you're trying to put yourself out there. And I don't know, for me personally, I've been told like it just comes across as being arrogant.
Mm,
Like you're trying to relate to people because you just don't know how to relate to people. You're trying to give them this like, oh, hey, I'm trying to find something that you and I have in common. So you tell me a story, and then I tell you a similar story that happened in my life, and it's like, oh, well, you're just trying to be better than me. And it's not. It's weird because that's not the case. Like I'm just trying to relate to you, and it's really tough to learn how to relate to people when you're just waiting for the shoe to drop, so to say. Like, all right, well, so when is this relationship going to end? When are you going to, it's kind of like you feel like a fraud. I don't know if you feel that way, but it's like you walk in to situations where whether it be with the opposite sex or with another person that you're just trying to be friends with and you're trying to create an intimate friendship with, and you're just waiting for the shoe to drop, so you just kind of feel like a fraud in that situation.
mm.
I don't know if you get that feeling sometimes where like I don't belong here, um, or that you start trying too hard to fit in and it never works out.
Yeah, I've heard it called. There's a phrase for it. I had it in my mind for a second. Now it's gone as well. It's called the. It's called the. It's basically this. Well, it's fear of missing out at the core, because you don't know your identity, or you forget it in the moment because, man, like the fear takes over. Um, it's the It has to do with your identity. I'm like, it's like on the tip of my tongue.
That's all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you
But
think of it later,
yeah,
we'll drop
I'll
it
think.
down
I'm
here.
sure I'll think of it. So.
So yeah, I mean, we spend a lot of time. I think when you're broken, and you come from a place, like I said, where the foundational people in your life have let you down. Like disappointment is just expected. The fear of not being disappointed, by somebody outweighs the expectation of disappointment, right? So, um, and that just comes kind of to the next part that I was hoping we could talk about, which is the fear of success.
Hmm.
Um, and I think when you're sitting there waiting for people to point you, it's really hard to be successful at, a lot of different things. I know my personal life, and we were talking about this a little bit yesterday during our little production meeting.
Mm.
There's always these times where you start working on something and you get right to the end of where you're going to finish it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you realize that now other people are going to be involved. It's no longer just you. And because you have that fear that everybody's going to disappoint you, you just kind of give up and you don't cross the finish line. So then you start to fear success, because once you start being successful, then people start coming into your life. And when people are coming into your life, they're going to disappoint you, because you're going to either make them disappoint you or they're just going to do it naturally,
Mm.
right? It's really hard to be successful. It's really easy to give up on stuff. And I don't know, how it's been in your life with that, but I know, like I said, personally, I could think of, I had this great idea and I worked really hard on it. And I ran into some issues with it, but I was creating a prayer app that I wanted to do.
Oh yeah.
And I thought it would be awesome. And I ran into some back end issues that I just couldn't make work, but I probably could have still put it out there. But then I was like, people were around me that I knew were like, oh, that's really interesting. I can't wait to see it. And I
Mm.
started thinking, oh, you know what? They're going to see this and they're going to hate it and it's going to be garbage. And um, so now it's just sitting here on my computer, 98% done.
Mm.
And I found every reason and excuse not to put it out there, just because I know people are going to disappoint me.
Mm.
Right. And that's not really the case, right? You know, so if you run into areas where you think, success is you have that fear of success in your life.
Yeah, I really I think back a lot of times to when I'm like when I'm trying to set a goal, right? Like for working out, and 30 days I want to get ripped, or I want to like do some cool like thing in my life where I mean honestly, we talked about last episode, like when I was playing basketball growing up. Man, like I really just did it so other people could see me because I didn't feel seen growing up. And so which every human is built with that design, right? Because we're meant to be seen by God. But like, point being, I would do it just and because I was living in the sight realm. I was trying to live by sight, not faith. And anyway, but naturally, I I think of many times where I would post something on social media too before the event happened, or like ahead of those 30 days. Say if I'm like I'm trying to work out in 30 days and hit a certain goal, but I'll post a couple things early on saying, man, like I'm about to change my life, like things are about to be different. You start putting like different cool quotes, which love putting quotes online, love quoting scripture, all those things. But I used to do it just to like almost hold myself accountable, but when there would be little like interaction with it, right? Like when people just wouldn't really um, react to it as much, I just took that as, oh, they must not be interested in what I have to say or this progress that I'm saying I'm about to, embark on. And so they're probably just judging me. They're probably thinking, this is what the heck are you doing? And you start overthinking it. And also just like I don't know if it's just laziness or pure laziness or whatever creeps in, and as you're going like a week in, you're just like, nah, like why am I really doing this? And and then you quit, and then and honestly, if you just would have kept going, you might have saw some progress there. Like a week later. Forget about social media, but like in your own pursuit of like, hey, I want to gain some weight, lose some weight, whatever. But I made it into this whole like competition of who's watching, who's not, and expecting that no one was actually rooting me on. And then when someone would say something, I did actually have a couple people. They actually would reach out here and there and be like, "Oh, great job, man! You're such a hard worker or whatever," and that would give me some fuel for a little bit. But then it's like, man, this like what if like what if I do this right, and then everybody like you're like, ah, you're just a fraud. Like you're not actually. You're just you fake that. Those aren't real results. Like I just think of you think of every worst outcome. You make it about yourself, and it's yeah, it's flat out insecurity. So
Yeah, so throw this up here. It seems like we base our lives on what others think of us, right?
yeah,
So we spend all this time, you know, I don't want to say not being selfish, but at the same point in time, it's not putting ourselves first, right? So, hey, I want to lose weight, but why do I want to lose weight? Well, I want all these other people to look at me and say, hey, great job, you lost a lot of weight.
hmm,
And then the minute they don't do that, well, then they don't care, so there's no reason to do that. Instead of, hey, I want to lose weight because I don't feel good about myself and I don't like how I look and I want to better myself. I want to be more healthy. I want to be this. I want to be that, and not put that expectation of success on other people. Like I think when you struggle with that whole when you struggle with fear, when you struggle with insecurities, when you struggle with being vulnerable, um, it's you put a lot of that on other people instead of your relationship with God, just that one on one. You know, the Bible says my body's a temple, so I should treat it that way, right?
hmm,
Uh, and that should be something between me and God, not or God and I. Sorry, better English. Um, not you know Facebook or Instagram or whatever social medias you're using. X, whatever's out there, right? It shouldn't be what all those people that maybe follow you or will post on your content think of your success. It should be what do you think of your success and what does God think of your success?
yeah,
And, you know, that's a barrier that I think I know personally, I can be honest, I struggle with that every day. Every day, I want to lose weight. I want to be better. I want to be more healthy. As you get older, it's harder to do, but it's just like if somebody isn't out there telling me what a good job I'm doing, then I lose all interest in doing that because I'm putting that idea that what other people think is more important than what is really happening.
hmm. That's
So
yeah. I was gonna say that's interesting because like I think I've felt that too, where it's like this like word they call it words of affirmation, which is like honestly it can be healthy, especially in a relationship where you trust each other and you want to build each other up in love, right? It says to do that in scripture all over the place, really. Um, but I think of it in the Corinthians the most. A couple of different passages in like chapter 8, chapter 3, I believe. And so anyway, but then you get into a real life situation, and it's like, right, so many different situations. You're like, wait, like words of affirmation is not just some like, it's not just some like, you take a test, a personality test, and you're like, man, I need this, and I need, like, I think everybody needs that, and then also there's a healthy amount of it, and then a very unhealthy amount of it, where it's like, yeah, like you're too focused on yourself, and you're not focused on other people, and then or you're just yeah, you're thinking about, man, how can I affirm them? Never about like, what does like God actually want you to do here? Are you trying to people please? And that kind of that's another whole different thing. But no, you bring up an interesting point. So
yeah, the words of affirmation is one of the five love languages, right?
yeah,
Uh, and I always so uh, now that I've been divorced for a while now, and I have started looking into possibly dating again. Although I don't know if I'm 100% ready for that or not. But I'm starting to put myself out there, and it's weird because when I'm on a Christian dating site, and I see like they talk about what are your love languages, And the very first one is like words of affirmation. And I
Yeah.
always like hesitate a little bit because I'm like, all right, well, then if I'm not constantly, the first thing I think of is myself, where if I'm not constantly getting affirmed, then there's something wrong with me, right?
Mm.
What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? And so now I've started to think about that for other people when they say that. I'm like, okay, great. Now I'm going to constantly, if I don't affirm everything that they're doing or saying, they're going to think something's wrong with them because it's how
Mm.
I look at it. Um, and it's really a struggle. Like, why
Mm.
I don't understand why or how to get past that constant need for somebody to tell me that I'm doing something good or right,
Mm.
or um, you know, it's just, and I know it comes from my childhood, and just that, uh, at my age, I still wish I haven't spoken to my father in a very, very long time. He's passed away,
Mm.
uh, so it'll never happen. But that just that I wish that when I was a kid, I would have just heard my dad say, "Hey, you did a good job," or "You were." I was proud. I think of my like trajectory on relationships would be much different had that ever happened. And what's crazy is, like this whole thing is about keeping God, like reaching for God, but keeping Him at arm's length. Like, hey, God, don't get too close, right?
Mm.
And I know that if I was to just put that arm down and let God, draw near to Him, and He will draw near to you, which is kind of the base verse that we've used for this.
Mm.
He would. I would probably get that like affirmation that I'm looking for in other people.
Mm.
Um, but to move past people um, and the disappointment of people and to move past that, it's really hard because then I might be successful. And
Mm.
success doesn't mean I'm going to have tons of money. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to have this. It just means that I'm going to accomplish the things that are important in life. I'm going to have strong relationships with other people. I'm going to have a strong relationship with God. And that I don't need those affirmations because I'm already getting that. And
Mm.
like I said, this is a journey to break down barriers and broken people. I'm a broken person. I don't know how to get past that at all,
Mm.
And I'm sure that there's a pastor out there that if they ever watch this would go, "Oh, here's 25 verses for you." Well, that's great. Um, those 25 verses I've read, and that doesn't mean that I've figured that part out.
Mm.
So, and I think it reminds me of, we've talked about him, Jordan Peterson is one of my favorite people to watch. Um, and it goes back to the idea, he says, to be successful, the first thing you have to do is just make your bed. Um, and I'm like, all right, well, what does that mean? He says, if you get up every morning and you make your bed, it's something they teach you in the military. You get up every morning and make your bed, you've already accomplished something.
Mm.
Um, you've been successful. I can tell you right now, my bed's a mess. I haven't made my bed yet. So, uh, and I just don't know how to get past that sometimes.
Mm. It's really good. Yeah, the thought of earlier that I was trying to remember, the term, it just came back to me, is imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that when we're talking about identity, really, earlier, just with fear as a whole, um, yeah, I think a lot of it is like kind of unpacking some of that maybe a little bit, man, like that imposter syndrome. Like you said, those 25 verses that somebody might bring, which are, it's the word of God. It's the truth. It's so good for our soul, but we like, obviously our flesh is kind of naturally like in rejection to that. Well, anybody, especially an unbeliever. But also sometimes, man, you could weaponize that if you're not careful. Like, yeah, if you're not, you don't have to perfectly break it down, but sometimes, yeah, like you and me or anybody, if we're honest, if we're really honest, we don't know who we are, and we don't know who God is apart from um, what He's revealed to us, and like through His Word and other people. But man, like we we don't know how to do it without the help of God, if we're honest. And so, yeah, it's interesting. Like, man, it's almost a good challenge to be honest when you use scripture. Be honest, like how is it in your life, too, when you're preaching it? That's more of a side trail, but no, it's interesting. And yeah, I like what Jordan Peterson said, just about like those little things. They really do just add up, like and give you perspective almost of how you view yourself, view other people, and so that's interesting.
Yeah, I like what you said though. Is we don't know who we are, and we're not sure who God is, but we don't know who we are in God. You
Yeah,
know,
that's a good way to
um,
put it.
and that's a struggle. You think you start to find it. You think um, you're starting down that path, and then once again, you run into somebody um, that maybe doesn't say the thing that you were expecting them to say, or that you're is God is put in that path to help you down that path. But then, those barriers that you've built over many years, and I think of the Three Little Pigs. The barriers that I've got are not brick. They're steel.
Mm,
They're like they're the hardest substance you can find, and I've used those to build these barriers. So
mm,
it's not like they're just going to crumble because I read a Bible verse.
mm.
And not saying that that can't happen for people, but it doesn't happen for everyone.
Right,
Uh,
might be a longer process.
yeah, so trying to break those through those barriers and have other people you start walking down this path, and then you run into somebody and you set them up for failure. It's not that they're going to fail; it's you set them up to fail because you expect to be disappointed by them, and you can see this that you're going to be if you can get with them or through them to the next point, you're going to be successful, and you have a fear of success, you know, um, you really start to just struggle with life. Like it's hard to get past, to get up every day. I don't know if that makes sense to many people or if that makes sense to you, Zach, but there are days when I feel like it's just hard to get up and get going. Just because, you're so tired of being disappointed, and you're so tired of not being successful. You just don't know how to get there. And I think that kind of leads into like the last thing that we want to talk about, which is intimacy.
Mm,
Um, and this is a really tough word, right? This is a tough word, especially for men.
yeah.
I think most people don't realize what this word really means. Um, Intimacy is not a physical thing. I think we have here. So Webster actually defines intimacy as something of a personal and private nature. And a lot of men, I know I think of it this way 90% of the time, is intimacy is the physical connection,
Hmm.
the physical connection between um, a man and a woman, right?
Right.
Um, but then if you look back through the Bible, and we talked about this, the story of David and Jonathan, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I think that really tells you what intimacy actually looks like on a real level. Like, you know, and it's weird. We talked about this too off screen, and we'll bring it up here. A lot of people will misuse this story to pervert the word of God to say that certain things are acceptable. Look at God said being gay was acceptable because look at the story of David and Jonathan, what David
Right.
says, and that's definitely not the case. But to give people that don't know the whole story, just a real quick synopsis of what the story is. It's in 1 Samuel 17 through 20. Jonathan was the eldest son of Saul, who was the king at the time, and David was the youngest son of Jesse. And they had this really unique bond that they developed because they were huge rivals, right? But at the same point in time, they were really close friends. I think at one point in time, the text says, I think it's 1 Samuel 18:1 says, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul.
Mm,
I mean, that's pretty deep, right? It's this whole idea of like being super intimate. When you love somebody as your own soul, that's a pretty deep love. and there was a lot of jealousy between the two of them. Jonathan would get really jealous of David every time David would accomplish something.
Mm.
But at the end, in 1 Samuel 20, they had a covenant between the two of them. And Jonathan declared, he said, "May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. And if I remain alive, may you show me the loving devotion of the Lord, that I may not die, and do not ever cut off your loving devotion from my household." It's, once again, it's like this really strong, loving bond that these two had, where they could be really intimate with each other without it being what most people would think the word intimate is.
Hmm.
Sorry, there was one more verse that I really wanted to read about this. I'm sorry, I don't have it right there. Oh yeah, it's 2 Samuel 1:26 when they were talking about it. He said, after Jonathan dies, David says that Jonathan's love was more wonderful than that of a woman. And I think that's the verse that kind of gets perverted a little bit.
Right, yeah.
You look back, they had this huge friendship where even though they were rivals, Jonathan stood by David's side all the time. And when you have these fears, right? You have this fear of disappointment, this fear of success. Having that kind of intimate relationship with anybody, whether it be a man or a woman, once again, intimacy is not physical. That's really, really tough. That's hard. Like, that's next to impossible. Now, nothing's impossible with God.
Yeah.
But when you're this broken, that's really next to impossible.
Mm.
So, I don't know how you feel about that. Just like I said, I want to throw that out there. We could talk about this whole story and the two, and how, that relates to fear in our lives and stuff like that. So,
yeah, that's a great story illustration, man, to add in there about David and Jonathan, and it's like that bond there as brothers that they shared, and it was a healthy connection. Like you talked about, like knowing who we are in God, and I think, and it's something to say about that, having like a healthy friendship, brother, sister, if you're a girl, lady watching, right? Like to push you and point you back to the Lord. And also when they're healthy too, like they can actually like pour into you too. Like in terms of like it said, David or Jonathan loved one another like their soul. Like it was like of their soul, and it was um, they said more than the love of a woman, right? And obviously in a very pure way. And so like you could tell that man, like, and even though there was some jealousy there, at the end of the day, I think of there's the show House of David actually. We are not sponsoring House of David, but the show House of David is a really good show. Shout out! And I was watching it, and there was a scene in there actually that they it said something like, because David represents the kingdom of God, essentially. Like if you're reading the Bible, he represents the lineage of a promise of God that's continuing, right? And because of sin and brokenness and the rebellion of King Saul, who is the wicked king, essentially, at that time, and was Jonathan's dad, Jonathan's father. And so Jonathan, for context, he was supposed to succeed his dad, but David was actually, his line is now picked to be like the new successor, the new lineage that actually brings about the birth of Jesus someday. And man, I remember there's a scene where they're like out in the field after Saul got angry. If anyone was jealous, it was really Saul, man. Like, and I think Jonathan was tempted because he saw that growing up. We talk about like how our father or whoever takes care of us, whoever we see around us growing up. Jonathan had that growing up all of his life. But when they're in the field together talking, Jonathan, I believe he said, remember, remember my line, like when you get into the kingdom. He said something like that, which whether that's in the Bible or not, that's probably how it played out. I know actually there's a couple verses, but it's not in my mind right now. But it's in the First and Second Samuel passage where he's like, "Hey, remember that line, remember me." Basically, uh, I think of the thief on the cross, right? Like, remember me when we go into the kingdom, where when we die. Um, and David's like, man, like I'll never forget you. Like, man, like this, and he had every right to like cut off Jonathan for everything he did, or not he did, but like his family line, which is what he's representing in that moment. And so he's because this is they're in the field because David's running. He's like Jonathan's helping him to run to like retreat because of everything Saul was doing to him. And this is a righteous moment of running. This is a healthy moment of like running away from danger. I think some people can that kind of like abuse from Saul and maybe a little bit of jealousy at first from Jonathan that he was naturally like carrying over and just had to let go of and realize the promise of God. Because he wanted to be king. Anyway, he had to actually like run and like help him run in that moment. That was a healthy escape. Because some people can like that's all they know, and they're like, I just want to stay around that. Like, and they're afraid to run away from like maybe the most toxic thing. If others people are examining this, like imagine David's like unhealthy. It's like, hey, like you gotta run away from this. This is not for you. And but David, if he's unhealthy, would be like, oh, what do you mean? Like your dad's amazing, and like just totally deny. And I feel like people like us, like that feel this weight. Um, we can put off that getting healthy, getting close to the Lord. It's not easy because, like you said, you build this steel, this wall that has been there since when you like maybe when you were young, and so there's a lot of good context there from that story.
Yeah, I think that's the idea is the selflessness
Mm-hmm.
of the whole thing, right? Jonathan had to give up himself,
Mm-hmm.
um, and all the things that come with that, right? And when you grow up, where like I said, you have this fear of disappointment, this fear of success, this fear of intimacy. Um, it's hard to give up yourself, right? Because the minute you do that and you let them all those barriers, you become extremely vulnerable. And um, when your life has been just a series of people, um, you know, not being, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this, like letting you down, right? I guess is the easiest way to say it. Like the foundational people in your life, every time you try to be vulnerable, or when you're little, you're always vulnerable, right? Um, they've let you down, they've disappointed you, so that's your whole expectation of life. It's really hard to be selfless um, in those moments. So having relationships where you can be truly intimate with somebody is really, really difficult. I think the story of Jonathan and David, for people like us, where we struggle with that, where, um, going back to, like I said, just making your bed, it's that one day at a time, that little struggle, and just, okay, I have to, I have to be vulnerable today. I
Mm-hmm.
have to let somebody in. Um, it's not. I'm not endorsing this movie either, but it's like um, it reminds me of Meet the Fockers, right? Great movie, really funny, but the circle of trust. That's really like whether you're in the circle of trust or not. Like when you have the barriers that I personally have in my life, the circle of trust is me. Like that's it. Um, and that makes it really hard to have that really personal relationship with God because um, if you look back through the Bible, especially as a man, And all the men watching this, I want you to understand something. Um, there has never been, that I can think of, a great man in the Bible that didn't have another great man standing by his side. A lot of them had great women too. Don't get me wrong; they were all married. They had great women, you know. But I think of Moses and Aaron, right? David and Jonathan.
Yeah.
You know, even Jesus, who didn't need anybody, had great people with him. Like, and if you look at their lives, especially like take Peter, for example, of the ups and downs of Peter's lives and all the things that, all the mistakes and disappointments of Peter's life, um, to go on and lead 3,000 people to Christ, in one night. It's just, you know, there's some barriers, and you can see it through the story, through Peter's story, of the barriers being broken down by God. Um, and I think in my life over the years, and I think hopefully for everybody, um, if you give God enough options, opportunities, where you're willing to be open to the things that He puts in your life, those barriers will start to break down. I think on one of our social media pages, I posted something that says, you pray for the things that you want for God,
Mm.
and then ignore Him when He gives you the things that you need.
Wow.
And
Good.
I can see that in these situations, right? Oh God, I want somebody that I can have this David and Jonathan relationship with, right? And they put somebody in your life, and you're like, who's this person? Like, this person? No, I could never have that relationship with this
Mm.
person. Um, and that's the person that you need in your life right at that minute, right? So then you end up like missing out, like,
Huh.
and when you look back, you realize like, oh my God, look at all the people that God put in my life that I just cast off to the side
Mm.
because of these fears, right? The fear of disappointment, the fear of success, the fear of intimacy.
Huh.
I've cast so many people off that could have made my life so much better, um, and my
Yeah.
relationship with God so much better. Um, because, while our relationship with God is an intimate one on one relationship, we experience that relationship through and with other people.
Mm.
At least my personal feeling about it.
Yeah. I want to add to that because like it the enemy will lie to you and I and anybody will say like this is where he brings fear into it. I believe he's like, man, you don't like need anybody, and you don't, there's people you think you want, like, well, hold try to get you. Yeah, it's like you got to chase, you got to write this perfect list out, of who your partner or friend should be. And then I think again back to David and Jonathan, it was like they, I mean, like we said, like Jonathan had a little bit of insecurity, right? Like he wanted to be king at some point. He's like, man, why can't I be like, and he had to overcome that. And David was so successful, and the hand of God was on him. He had to overcome that. And then David was struggling, man, with the abuse of Jonathan's dad Saul, and what did he have to overcome was, man, that like just he needed to forget. He needed to like forgive Jonathan's line, and that's when he said like, "I won't forget your line," in the field. And so those two things were accomplished there. Like the insecurities of man, they forgiveness was accomplished there, and man, humility, and from Jonathan and from David, and like, and then on paper, when you read the Bible, it's like man, they love each other like man more than love a woman in terms of their soul and you're like man, like it looks like that's something I'd want, but it actually like to them, they probably are in that same moment weren't even really thinking about it that way, like this is my perfect list. This is what I need from people, what I want from people, and then looking back, you're like, wow, I really needed that God. And then for us reading that thousands of years later, we're like, man, that's what I want. And so like sometimes, yeah, like you said, the things we need, we don't realize. Which I love that saying, that quote you made. We don't realize that's actually what we need. And then in retro, we look back and we're like, wait, I actually wanted that the whole time, and I didn't. I just didn't have the trust to carry that. So anyway, I love what you said there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something big, and it's probably what we should do in our next episode is the idea of forgiveness.
Oh,
You know,
forgiveness.
um, I think a lot of this comes down to uh, forgiving a lot of different things in our lives. Forgiving people. I think I was watching a guy on YouTube Shorts the other day, and he was talking about the different four areas of forgiveness. And the first one is forgiving people that have hurt us,
Mm.
uh, forgiving ourselves. I think three was forgiving. I think it was go back to other people and ask for forgiveness. And I
Mm.
forget what the fourth one was, but the first two, forgiving others who've hurt us, is really hard.
Yeah.
And forgiving ourselves is probably even more difficult. But if you can't do those two things, where you forgive yourself for um, all the things that you've done in your life, and it's really easy to play the blame game and look back to, well, I'm this way because of these people. Well,
Mm.
you don't have to be that way because of those people. It's a
Right.
choice. I work with a bunch of 14-year-olds. They're all now 15-year-olds. We're going into sophomore as a small group leader in our high school group. And, some of them come from pretty rough situations.
Mm.
Um, I can relate to them. And I tell them all the time. And it's funny because you find out in life, you're really good at giving advice. You're really terrible at following it.
Mm. Yeah.
And I think I tell them all the time, like, you don't have to be a product of your circumstances. You can be something different. I could have grown up to be an alcoholic and abusive in many different ways. And I don't drink. I haven't drank in a very, very long time. It's not part of my life. And I can be different than what I probably should have been. But
Mm.
yeah, it's hard for me to follow my own advice. Like, I don't have to be a product of my circumstances as a kid or as a young adult or even as an older adult. I can be something different. So leading into that, so this is our verse for today. Proverbs 29:25. The fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. And that word safe is probably the most important word in there to me personally.
Mm.
Because I put a lot of my stock, and we talked about this, in what other people say. The idea,
Yeah.
um, we base our lives on what others think of us. That whole idea, like, and when you do that, safety, I don't ever feel safe,
Mm.
right? And I'm always in constant fear of intimacy, the disappointment of other people, of being successful in relationships with other people. So that snare is always there, and I never feel safe. And um, trying to put my trust in the Lord, that's what I think we all want, right? We all want to feel safe in the relationships we're in. So, it's just working to break down those barriers, stop fearing what other people think of me, stop worrying about, are they whispering about me? Um, and just trust that God loves me.
Mm.
God's there for me. God wants the best for me.
Mm.
That if I follow the path that He lays in front of me, I don't have to be afraid of disappointment. I don't have to be afraid of success. I don't have to be afraid of intimacy. I can be safe
Mm.
because the Lord is going to make me safe. Um,
That's good.
yeah, it's a hard step to get over.
Yeah.
Like we said before, at 25, we could have 25 verses that'll fix everything, but it's really hard to apply them when you come from a really place of brokenness.
Mm.
And that's kind of why we're here, right? To talk about how you get past that stuff.
Mm.
So what does that verse sit with you?
It's really good. Yeah. Well, I do think of a couple. I did think of a couple other verses where I want to lay this context here, and I want to share one last thing that like I learned. I started some counseling recently. This was in the last like year, 2 years, where I had realized this when we speak of like fear of man. So I don't know. Right away, my brain goes to a couple passages, but obviously none of us do this perfectly because, like everybody in the world, man, we're fearing something. We fear everybody's competing, man. All the markets, all the things going on. It's like everybody's failing at this. Even in the church, man. As believers, we're failing at this at times because so Philippians 3 and Galatians 3 also talk about this fear of man. And it says, don't put confidence in flesh, is what it really ultimately says. The action step is, hey, like, don't put your confidence in the flesh. We are of the Spirit of God. We began by the Spirit, that's Galatians, and we worship by the Spirit, Philippians, and put our confidence in the Spirit and not in the flesh. And it's like, man, that's hard to do. Like, you can't do that, is what it's saying, in your own strength. That's from the Spirit of God. Um, but, like, on paper, like, that's on paper, and then, which it's real life, but it's hard if we're honest. I think it's first being honest about that. And I had to do this like recently. And so in the last 2 years, and I'm still, again, we're still both working through this, right, as we've been talking about. But what I noticed about my area of confidence in the flesh and like trusting other people too much or not enough, right, and this whole fear thing, especially the intimacy part. Um, anyway, my counselor sat me down and he basically said, Zach, like, he's like, tell me about this little story here or something I had said earlier in the meeting. And so I had talked about when I was in first grade, I used to I used to look at my teacher as perfect. Like I just assumed that they were perfect and had nothing wrong with them, and that they were like God, pretty much. Like I wasn't thinking they were God in that moment, but like subconsciously, I was assuming my teacher was perfect, had nothing wrong with them. They were excelling at life. And so when I got in trouble for just even like talking too loud for 2 seconds, and you know, in first grade they take the paper clip or the clothespin and they put it from the red face to the all the way to the green face and say like, or sorry, vice versa, because oh you're good today or you're bad today. And so like if I was on one of the opposite ends, especially the red one or the yellow one, I was just like devastated, and I would clamp up and I would be quiet the rest of the whole day. And kids would look at me and be like, haha, you got in trouble, and stuff like that. And they didn't take it that serious when they got in trouble, which some of that could be disrespect, but also it's like, man, the teacher just wanted me to be quiet. He wasn't saying, or she wasn't saying, you're such a disappointment. Like, you are this person on the red face. It was like, hey, like, I just gave you a warning, and you better not do it again. Anyway, he said to me, landing the plane here, he said to me, like, Zach, like, you look at other people as if they are perfect, and you yourself know you're not perfect, so you do that. You don't think they have any baggage, and so you trust you assuming that everyone else has it together but you. And then at times you're in reverse mode where it's like, man, like no one else is perfect. Like everyone's the scum of the earth, and only I can carry this thing myself. Like, you know, this life, and I have to be the one to carry the torch. And so then you, forgetting that you're imperfect, try to do the same thing. And he was saying, he just like ministered to me in that moment. Was like, man, they're not perfect. You're not perfect. Man, only the Spirit of God is perfect. And I was like, dang, that's crazy. Like, I didn't know what to do after that. I just kind of like went home and I had to think about that deeply, and I still do to this day. And I read a verse like that in Proverbs, I'm like, honestly, yeah, that's kind of what it is. Like anytime we compromise or anything like that, it's really this like fear of man at the core, or we naturally, we're not trying to all the time, but the sin condition, man, we're trying to choose God, but we end up choosing the flesh. And so it's really, It's I'm not haven't accomplished it perfectly. Neither of you, no one has, but through the Spirit of God, He helps us. And so it's interesting to think about. I love that verse.
Yeah, I think something you said there kind of reminded me of Matthew 7, right? The whole idea of like, why are you worried about the speck in another's eye when you have a log in your own eye?
Yeah.
You know, that verse, it's really easy when I personally think, in my life, it's always been very easy to, when I expect, everybody to be either disappoint me or, all these different fears that I've had, right? And the snare that is being laid for me is in that verse sometimes when I start looking at other people like, oh yeah, you think you're so perfect. Look at all these sins, right? That instead of just being like, all right, well, that person's not trying to be perfect. They're trying to look, they see the log in my eye that I don't see, and they're just trying to help me with that. Um, it's just
Hmm.
like that verse is easy as a Christian. I think it's easy to pervert when you have all these fears,
Hmm.
because it's very easy to look outward. Um, it's much easier to look outward than it is to look inward
Yeah.
sometimes.
That's really good. Yeah.
All right. Well, so closing, we're just gonna. I had a couple acronyms for fear. I think the one that we use the most is this one: fear, forget everything and run.
Hmm.
Right. So you have the choice. Like, there's a tough situation. Um, you can be intimate with somebody. You could be successful. You could have a relationship where they're not going to disappoint you, and you have this fear. So you just forget everything and run. Right. All right. Well, we could be close. We could be intimate. I could be successful. We could be. Everything could be great. That's not my life, and I don't like that. So I'm gonna just run away. Right.
Hmm.
Um, and I think when you have a lot of barriers in your life that you're struggling to break down, this is the go-to,
Hmm.
um, to just forget everything and run. I'm not I'm not going to do it. The second choice we have with fear is we can face everything and rise.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's one of the great things of the 12-step program personally is that they make you face everything. You have to face all of the things that you've done,
Hmm.
with whatever addiction you had, right? Um, and I think it wouldn't be a stretch to say that people that have come from tough backgrounds and stuff like that have an addiction to failure.
Hmm. Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
you're addicted to failing in relationships. You're addicted to failing in life. Um, and it's always somebody else's fault.
Hmm.
So you can choose to just stop and face everything and rise. God wants us to rise. It's a safe place for us to be. Um,
Hmm.
you know, so those are the choices we're left with. Are we going to continue to forget everything and run, and run away from intimacy? Are we going to run away from success? Are we going to run away from affirmation, from people, true affirmation from people,
Hmm.
even if it's not what we want to hear, having people affirm us? Or are we going to turn around and face all those things and finally have an intimate relationship with God, have a successful relationship with God, have a non disappointing relationship with God?
Right.
Um, and if we can face all those things and turn around, I think we can then have those kind of relationships with other people,
Hmm.
with God's people. Um, I don't know. That's my 2 cents on that. What do you think, Zach?
It's really good. Yeah, man. It's such a good, like, just real, like, right there. Like, this is it, man. Like, that's what we got to do. It's like, man, face everything and rise. And it's not easy, man. And none of us have figured it out perfectly. But, man, I love that. Like, it's such a great summary of everything we just talked about today, man. Like, and just this is what I do now. It's like starting with honesty. I think that's what we've been really touching on. Is man, is like in the vulnerability part. It's like, man, like God wants us to tell the truth. Like, just tell the truth of the matter. And it's not easy, but it's simple. It's like, this is the thing to do. And face everything by just telling the truth and being honest. And there's something about like coming into the light. Like darkness kind of retreats, man, when you come into the light. Because what do? We naturally hide, we run. We talked about it last episode in the garden, right? Like, I know we're not thinking of that in every scenario in our lives, but like that's what we do. We run. And so, what if we just faced everything and rise? Man, there's something to that. So, it's something I'm gonna take away, man, and just like, how can I, apply this to my life? It'll be interesting. And so, and I love that quote and loved our conversation today.
Yeah, it's been pretty awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I'll just say this real quick. If you have enjoyed the conversations we've had, you enjoy some of the content we're making, just kind of follow us on all our different socials. We're on Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube. This will go up on YouTube. This will be on Spotify as well. And hopefully we'll have a TikTok page fairly shortly. I just have to finish putting it together for us.
Yeah.
But, I think just to kind of close it up real quick and then we'll pray I think it kind of goes back to what we talked about with Jordan Peterson, just getting up and making your bed every day.
Yeah.
So I think some just practicals that if you're out there listening, something I have to apply to my life personally. I know that I need to be better at this. Just get up and read a verse every day, right?
Yeah.
Just get up and say a prayer every morning, and I think we should probably do an episode on prayer and how prayer is, if you want to learn to be selfless, pray, because prayer is about being selfless, in my personal opinion. So, I hope that for everybody out there that watches this, that you can learn to face everything and rise, and understand that there is a time to forget everything and run. We learned that through the story of David. But it was, I can kind of look at that and say, he wasn't really forgetting everything and running away. He was facing everything and rising. And in that moment, what he had to face was to find a safe place to be, right? And that's not an easy decision. You have to run away from everything. That's not easy. So
yeah, you ran into the presence of God. That was good.
Yeah. So I hope you guys are out there, that you enjoyed this, and we have enjoyed our time together. And hopefully that, like I said, our goal is that one person watches this and we plant the seed of God in there, and they find God in their life, and they become successful. They have an intimate relationship with God, and they're no longer disappointed by the world around them. So I'll pray real quick and we'll be on our way. Father, thank you for this time together. Thank you for the wisdom of your word, and just the things that you have left for us to read and discuss and absorb, to find you more in our lives. Our goal is to draw nearer to you as you draw nearer to us. We just pray through these conversations that we continue to break down the barriers in our lives that keep us from you, and that the people, whoever watches this, if anybody watches this, that it helps them break down the barriers in their lives so they can draw near to you. Once again, we're just so grateful for everything you do in our lives and the people you put in our lives, even the times that we're asking you for the things that we want and we ignore you when you give us the things that we need, that we start to find those things in our lives a little bit better. We just pray all these things in your son's name. Amen.
Amen.